Imagine living with someone for 7 years, pouring your heart into a marriage only to become invisible. That was my reality. When I finally left, I didn't slam the door. I quietly walked away, leaving behind a house filled with silence and a farewell note. Days turned into a week, and not a single call or text came through. She hadn't even noticed I was gone. But when reality hit, it wasn't just her loneliness she had to face. It was the life I took with me. But before diving deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Ethan Carter sat quietly at the edge of the living room sofa, watching his wife, Sophia Bennett, as she tapped away on her phone, completely engrossed in her screen. After 7 years of marriage, Ethan felt more like an invisible fixture in their home than a partner. He had spent years pouring his heart into their relationship, trying to anticipate her needs, striving to make her happy, and yearning for a sense of connection. Yet, his efforts were met with indifference, brushed aside like insignificant details in the larger narrative of Sophia's self-centered world. Sophia, by contrast, had grown increasingly distant and dismissive. Once full of warmth and affection, she now barely acknowledged Ethan's presence unless it served her purposes. Her priorities had shifted. Her career, her social life, even her trivial indulgences seemed to matter more than the man she had once promised to cherish. For Ethan, every day felt like a struggle to reclaim even a sliver of the bond they once had. But the void between them only widened. Ethan's frustrations had reached a boiling point. One evening he mustered the courage to break the silence that had enveloped their relationship. Like an impenetrable fog, he leaned forward, his voice steady yet laden with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Sophia, do you think we should try to improve our marriage?" he asked, his eyes searching hers for any flicker of acknowledgement. Without even looking up from her phone, Sophia dismissed him with a curt response. "I'm busy. You do you," she said, her tone laced with indifference. The words struck Ethan like a physical blow. He felt his chest tighten, his throat dry, summoning what little patience he had left. He pressed on. "I feel like I'm just a shadow in this house," he said quietly, hoping his vulnerability might spark a meaningful conversation. Sophia finally glanced up, but only to deliver a cold, cutting smirk. "If you don't like it, you can leave," she retorted, her tone devoid of care or concern. In that moment something shifted in Ethan. Her words weren't just dismissive, they were a clear dismissal of him, his feelings, and their marriage. As Sophia returned her attention to her phone, Ethan realized that he was done waiting for change. He wouldn't stay silent anymore, and this time he would leave. But not without ensuring Sophia understood the true cost of her neglect. Reluctantly, Ethan and Sophia agreed to attend couples therapy. It was Ethan's idea, a last-ditch effort to salvage their crumbling marriage. For him, it was a chance to confront the growing distance between them. For Sophia, it was nothing more than a chore, a box to check off before moving on with her. Their first session began with Dr. Evelyn Monroe, a composed and empathetic therapist. With years of experience navigating troubled relationships, she greeted them warmly, her calm demeanor setting a stark contrast to the tension that lingered between Ethan and Sophia. "Let's start simple," Dr. Monroe began, her tone inviting yet firm. "What do you both value most in a marriage?" Ethan glanced at Sophia, hoping she might speak first, but she remained impassive, her eyes fixed on the clock. When she finally answered, her words were cold and clinical. "Stability. I like having someone pay the bills and keep the house in order." Ethan's breath hitched. The response hit him harder than he anticipated. "That's it?" he asked, unable to keep the disbelief out of his voice. Sophia shrugged, clearly unmoved. "What else is there? Everyone needs stability." Ethan turned to Dr. Monroe, his expression a mix of confusion and sadness. "Is that what I am to her? A walking paycheck and a glorified housekeeper?" Dr. Monroe held Ethan's gaze, her empathetic eyes encouraging him to continue. "It feels like I've been trying so hard to be her partner, to give her love, support, everything she needs, but she doesn't even see me. I'm just the convenient. Trisha. Before Dr. Monroe could respond, Sophia interjected, her tone defensive. Don't twist my words, Ethan. I didn't say you're just a housekeeper. I'm saying stability is important. I like having a predictable life. But what about love, Sophia? Ethan pressed, his voice trembling. What about connection? Companionship? Don't those matter to you? Sophia rolled her eyes. Of course they matter, but you're making this a bigger deal than it is. Ethan sank back in his chair, the weight of her indifference settling heavily on his chest. Dr. Monroe, sensing the emotional undercurrent in the room, leaned forward. And Sophia, do you understand why Ethan feels undervalued? Sophia shrugged again. I think he's overreacting. I'm not the romantic type, and he knows that. Why are we even doing this? It's not like there's a major issue. Ethan looked at her, stunned. Her words weren't just dismissive, they were a complete denial of the cracks in their relationship. For years he had carried the weight of their marriage, trying to fix problems she refused to acknowledge. Now, in the glaring light of the therapy room, the truth became undeniable. Sophia didn't care. Dr. Monroe shifted her attention back to Ethan. Ethan, how does hearing that make you feel? He took a moment before answering, his voice quieted her but steadier. It makes me feel like I've been fooling myself. I've been holding on to something that doesn't exist. She doesn't see me as her partner. She sees me as a function. This session marked a turning point for Ethan. As the conversation unfolded, he began to see the futility in his efforts to salvage their relationship. Sophia's indifference was no longer a question of misunderstanding. It was a glaring truth. By the end of the session, Ethan's mindset had shifted. He no longer felt the urge to fight for their marriage. Instead, he resolved to fight for himself. With a heavy but resolute heart, Ethan walked out of the therapy room, leaving Sophia behind. She had chosen stability over love, convenience over connection, and in doing so, she had lost him. For Ethan, this wasn't just the end of a session. It was the beginning of his awakening. Attention in the therapy sessions grew thicker with each passing week. What had started as a hopeful attempt to bridge the gap between them quickly became an exercise in frustration, particularly for Sophia. While Ethan approached each session with openness and vulnerability, Sophia's indifference was unmistakable. She would often arrive late. Her phone clutched in her hand, her answers curt and dismissive. During what would turn out to be their final session together, Dr. Evelyn Monroe posed a question aimed at fostering reflection. Sophia, what do you think Ethan needs from you to feel more connected in this marriage? Sophia sighed audibly, crossing her arms as she leaned back in her chair. I don't know, I'm not a mind reader, she said, her tone dripping with exasperation. If he has a problem, he should just say it outright instead of dragging me here. Ethan, seated beside her, clenched his fists under the table, his patience wearing thin. That's exactly what this is for, Sophia, to talk about the problems. But every time I try, you shut me down. Sophia rolled her eyes, clearly unbothered by his frustration. Because there's nothing to fix, you're the one making a big deal out of everything. I'm fine with how things are. Dr. Monroe intervened gently. Sophia, therapy is about finding a way to meet each other's needs. It's not about assigning blame. But Sophia had already tuned out. Her posture stiffened, signaling her disinterest. Look, she said, cutting off further discussion. This is enough. I don't need anyone analyzing me. Ethan's the one with the problem, not me. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Ethan felt a pang of despair, but also a growing clarity. Her refusal to engage wasn't just a momentary lapse. It was emblematic of her disregard for their marriage. Sophia stood abruptly, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I don't have time for this, she declared. If Ethan wants to waste his time here, that's on him. I have better things to do. Dr. Monroe exchanged a concerned glance with Ethan, who sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the floor. As Sophia exited the room, the sound of the door closing echoed like a final punctuation mark on their shared effort. In that moment, Ethan's resolve solidified. Her words and actions confirmed what he had been reluctant to accept. Sophia wasn't interested in fixing their relationship. For her, it was easier to walk away from therapy than to confront the cracks in their marriage. For Ethan, it was the moment he realized that saving himself meant letting go of her. The quiet of the private therapy session contrasted starkly with the storm brewing within Ethan. Across from him, Dr. Evelyn Monroe sat patiently, waiting for him to process his thoughts. After weeks of sharing the therapy space with Sophia's dismissive attitude, this was a rare moment where he could speak freely without being interrupted or invalidated. For the first time in a long while, Ethan allowed himself to say the words he had been avoiding. "He doesn't love me," he said. His voice calmed but weighted with finality. "She never did. I've just been convenient for her." Dr. Monroe nodded empathetically. "That's a painful realization, Ethan. But it's also a step toward clarity. What do you want to do next?" Ethan's lips curled into a faint, resolute smirk. "I'll leave," he said, his voice steady. But not quietly. For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of control. The years of emotional neglect, the nights spent wondering how to fix a one-sided marriage, the endless attempts to win Sophia's affection, all of it had led him to this moment. He had no intention of leaving as a victim. If Sophia valued convenience over connection, then he would ensure she experienced life without the comforts she had taken for granted. Over the following days, Ethan methodically laid out his plan. His approach wasn't born of spite but of a need to reclaim his dignity. Each step was carefully calculated, rooted in practicality and his legal rights. Ethan started with their joint bank account. He had contributed the bulk of the funds and he ensured every withdrawal was within his legal right. Quietly, he moved his money into a private account, leaving the joint one nearly empty. He smiled bitterly at the thought of Sophia realizing, too late, that her stability depended on the man she had dismissed. Next, Ethan reviewed the household bills. Most accounts, electricity, water, internet, were under his name. He arranged for their cancellation, effective shortly after his departure. If Sophia had never bothered to manage these basics, she would now face the challenge of navigating them alone. Ethan went through Sophia's laptop and phone records, uncovering messages that confirmed her affair with Daniel Harris. The pain of reading her words was sharp, but it also steeled his resolve. He compiled the evidence discreetly, ensuring he had a complete record for future use. Consulting a lawyer, Ethan outlined his rights and filed paperwork to protect his share of their marital assets. The process was empowering. For the first time, he felt like he was reclaiming control over his own life. As the plan came together, Ethan pinned a simple but impactful note. "Sophia, thank you for teaching me a valuable lesson. I deserve more than to be an accessory in someone else's life. Enjoy the stability you cherish." He would leave it on the dining table, the final word in their one-sided relationship. Unlike the desperation he had felt weeks ago, Ethan now moved with quiet determination. His actions weren't impulsive, they were deliberate and rooted in self-respect. He no longer sought Sophia's validation or hoped for her to change. Instead, he focused on ensuring that, for once, she would feel the consequences of her actions. As he finalized his preparations, Ethan felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. For years, he had lived in the shadow of someone who couldn't or wouldn't see his worth. Now, he was ready to step into the light, leaving Sophia to face the darkness she had created. His departure wouldn't just be an end, it would be a statement. The evening was unusually quiet, with a faint breeze rustling the leaves in the backyard. Ethan had just returned home after a long day and was met with an unexpected sound. Laughter. It wasn't the casual laughter of a TV show or a phone call, it was vibrant, intimate, and far too familiar. He paused in the hallway, his heart sinking as he strained to identify the voices. Curious, but uneasy, Ethan moved toward the sliding glass door leading to the backyard. The glow of the patio lights spilled onto the lawn, revealing Sophia lounging comfortably on a deck chair. Sitting next to her, a man Ethan immediately recognized, Daniel Harris, her gym buddy. They were sharing a bottle of wine, their body language relaxed, their smiles unmistakably flirtatious. Sophia did not recognize Andrew for a moment before opening the door and inviting them inside. Curious but uneasy, she walked to the door. Sitting right beside her, Ethan stepped outside, his chest tightening as he fought to keep his composure. "Gym buddy sipping wine in my backyard, huh?" he said, his voice sharp but controlled. Sophia barely glanced at him, her nonchalance stoking his anger. "So what?" she replied, her tone dripping with indifference. "Don't make a big deal out of it." Daniel shifted awkwardly, clearly sensing the tension, but Sophia remained unfazed. Her casual shrug, as if the situation were trivial, sent a surge of betrayal through Ethan. "Not a big deal," he repeated, his voice rising. "You're drinking wine with another man in our backyard, and that's not a big deal?" Sophia took a deliberate sip from her glass, her eyes cool and dismissive. "You're overreacting, we're just talking. Maybe you should relax." Ethan stared at her, the realization hitting him like a tidal wave. This wasn't just disrespect, it was utter disregard for their marriage. He turned his gaze to Daniel, who looked like he wanted to disappear. "And you?" Ethan asked, his tone cutting. "What are you even doing here?" Daniel stammered. Sophia invited me over, for advice on workouts." "Workouts?" Ethan shot back, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Wine pairs perfectly with squats." Sophia rolled her eyes, her irritation showing. "Oh please Ethan, don't embarrass yourself." At that moment, Ethan's anger gave way to a chilling clarity. There was no guilt in her voice, no regret in her posture. She didn't even try to deny the implication of their closeness. It was as though she believed he wouldn't, or couldn't, do anything about it. Without another word, Ethan turned and walked back into the house. His hands trembled as he closed the door behind him, but his mind was already racing. If Sophia wanted to treat their marriage like a convenience, then it was time for her to feel what life would be like without it. The laughter resumed outside, faint but piercing, echoing through the cracks of Ethan's resolve. This time, though, it wasn't anger that filled him. It was determination. That moment solidified his decision to leave, and to ensure that Sophia's betrayal wouldn't come without consequences. As he stood in the quiet of the kitchen, staring at the shared wine glasses on the counter, he felt a grim sense of purpose. The betrayal had stripped him of any illusions, but it had also handed him the clarity he needed. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of his revenge. The house was eerily quiet that night, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Ethan sat in the dimly lit living room, his mind replaying the scene from the backyard. Sophia's laughter with Daniel echoed in his ears, each chuckle a stab at his dignity. Determined to find clarity amidst the chaos, he decided to confront the gnawing suspicion that something deeper was going on. Glancing over at Sophia's laptop, left casually on the kitchen counter, Ethan hesitated. A part of him felt guilty. This wasn't something he'd normally do. Another part of him, hardened by her blatant disregard, pushed him forward. If she had nothing to hide, there was no harm. If she did, well, it was time for the truth. He opened the laptop, entering the password he knew by heart, her birthday, as thoughtless as her responses in therapy. Her email account was already open, but nothing unusual caught his attention. Then he noticed the icon for a messaging app minimized in the corner. His pulse quickened as he clicked it. The chat window loaded instantly, revealing an ongoing conversation with Daniel Harris. The exchange was casual at first, but as Ethan scrolled up, the tone shifted to something far more intimate. His eyes darted over the lines of text, each word cutting deeper than the last. "Sophia, Ethan is so predictable, he just nags and nags, I can't take it anymore." "Daniel, then why stay, you know I'm here for you." "Sophia, because he pays the bills and it's easy. But honestly, Ethan bores me to death, you're who I really need." "Hasn't." Ethan froze, his heart pounded in his chest as he reread the words, hoping they might somehow change, but there they were, cold, calculated, and final. The messages weren't just about an affair, they were a window into Sophia's complete disregard for him as a person. She had reduced him to a financial safety net, a convenient placeholder while she entertained her true desires elsewhere. The realization left him numb for a moment, his hands hovering over the keyboard. He felt anger surge, but it was tempered by a sense of vindication. Her betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was premeditated, calculated, and unapologetic. As he scrolled further, another message caught his eye, one that sealed any lingering doubts. Sophia. He's so clueless, I could disappear for days and he probably wouldn't notice. Daniel, you should just leave him already. Sophia, why would I do that? I'd lose the house, the money, everything. No thanks. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. The sheer audacity of her words hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was openly exploiting him, using him as a means to maintain her comfortable life. He closed the laptop with a quiet click and sat in the stillness of the room. The betrayal felt like a lead weight on his chest, but alongside it came clarity. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together and there was no room left for doubt. Sophia didn't just lack love for him, she lacked respect, empathy, and any semblance of loyalty. Ethan's initial shock began to subside, replaced by a growing sense of determination. He wasn't going to confront her yet. No, this required careful planning. Her messages confirmed what he already knew. Sophia valued convenience above all else. If she couldn't appreciate what he brought to her life, he would take it away, piece by piece. As he stood, a quiet calm settled over him. The path ahead was clear. Sophia had chosen to play games with his trust, but she had underestimated his resolve. She might have thought he was predictable, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. For Ethan, the evidence wasn't just a confirmation of her betrayal, it was the fuel he needed to reclaim his life. The betrayal sat heavy in Ethan's chest, but instead of consuming him with despair, lit a fire of quiet determination. He had spent years giving Sophia his trust, his effort, and his love, only to be repaid with indifference and deceit. The messages he uncovered left no room for reconciliation, only a clear path forward. He would leave her, but not without ensuring she felt the weight of her choices. Ethan's first move was the easiest. The joint bank account they shared was one he had primarily funded, covering the mortgage, bills, and their shared expenses. For years, Sophia had taken for granted that the money would always be there. She never asked how it was managed. She simply enjoyed the benefits. Sitting at his laptop late that night, Ethan logged into their online banking portal. With calm precision, he transferred the majority of the funds into his personal account. He left just enough in the joint account to avoid raising immediate suspicion. Sophia never checked it regularly anyway. The remaining balance would cover minor automatic deductions, ensuring she wouldn't notice anything amiss until he was long gone. As the transfer confirmation popped up on the screen, Ethan felt an unexpected sense of liberation. He had spent years financing Sophia's comforts, and now, for the first time, he was reclaiming control. The next step was more personal, and Ethan approached it with a mixture of pain and resolve. Sophia had built her social life around a carefully curated image of sophistication and respectability. Her friends and family adored her, or so she had led them to believe. But Ethan knew the truth, and now, it was time for others to see it as well. He compiled the damning messages between Sophia and Daniel into a neat, indisputable package. Screenshots of the conversations, complete with timestamps, painted a clear picture of her betrayal. Ethan debated whether to send the evidence anonymously, but ultimately decided against. His name on the emails would leave no room for misunderstanding. That evening he crafted a brief, direct message to her closest friends and family. I regret to inform you that Sophia is not been honest about her commitments in our marriage. Attached her messages that provide context. I thought you should know the truth. Ethan. The reading send was a strange combination of cathartic and bittersweet. He wasn't seeking revenge out of malice. It was about holding Sophia accountable for the lies she had spun. Sophia had always relied on Ethan to manage the household logistics, utilities, internet, even the subscriptions she used daily. It was another example of how she had taken his role in their life for granted. Now, Ethan would remove those conveniences, forcing her to confront the reality of her dependence. Over the course of the next few days, Ethan contacted each service provider. One by one, he canceled the accounts under his name. The electricity and water would be cut off shortly after his planned departure, and the internet, Sophia's lifeline to both work and leisure, would end the same day. When the customer service representative asked if he wanted to transfer the accounts to another person, Ethan declined, just canceled them outright, he said. His voice was steady, almost detached, but inwardly he felt a grim satisfaction. Sophia would finally understand how much of her stability had been built on the foundation he provided. The final piece of his plan required careful thought and professional guidance. Ethan met with a lawyer to ensure he could protect what was rightfully his. Their home, though in both their names, had been financed almost entirely by him. The lawyer assured him that he had a strong case for reclaiming his share of the assets. Ethan also filed for divorce, initiating the legal process quietly. The lawyer advised him to act swiftly and document everything, which Ethan had already done. Every step was calculated to minimize Sophia's ability to contest or manipulate the proceedings. Not at all, Sophia remained blissfully unaware. Her days continued as they always had, texting Daniel, lounging in the house Ethan maintained, and scrolling through social media. She hadn't noticed the dwindling funds in their account, the upcoming cancellation, notices for utilities, or the brewing legal action. Her complacency only reinforced Ethan's resolve. The night before he planned to leave, Ethan wrote a simple note and placed it on the kitchen counter. And Sophia, I've spent years giving you love, respect, and stability. You've given me betrayal and indifference. I hope you enjoy the life you've built for yourself, because I'm done being part of it. Goodbye. Ethan. I'm totally confused and reflexive. As Ethan packed his bags and quietly left the house, he felt a surprising calm wash over him. His plan was not driven by anger anymore, but by a desire to reclaim his dignity. He had given Sophia everything, and now he was taking back what was his. She would wake up to an empty house, a disconnected life, and the undeniable consequences of her actions. For Ethan, this wasn't just an exit, it was a new beginning. And for Sophia, it would be a reckoning she never saw coming. The house was silent, the kind of silence that felt both heavy and freeing. Ethan moved deliberately, packing his belongings with quiet efficiency. He didn't take much, just the essentials, clothes, a few personal items, and his laptop. Everything else he left behind. The things in the house no longer felt like his. They were merely relics of a life he had poured himself into, a life that Sophia had rendered meaningless. As he zipped up his final bag, Ethan paused, his eyes scanning the room. The furniture they had picked out together, the photos from their early years, everything felt like a distant memory. The space had once been filled with laughter and hope, but now, it was just an empty shell. Much like their marriage. He sighed, a mixture of sadness and resolve washing over him. This was the end of one chapter, and the start of another. One where he would no longer be a shadow in someone else's life. Moving to the kitchen, he retrieved the note he had written earlier. It was short but carried the weight of his emotions, the words chosen carefully to express both closure and clarity. He placed it on the counter where he knew she would see it, the final message he would leave in the home they had shared. Sophia, thank you for teaching me a valuable lesson. I deserve a better life. One where I'm not someone's background character. You've shown me what stability means to you, and now, I hope you enjoy it fully on your goodbye. Ethan. He reread the note one last time, ensuring it conveyed everything he felt. Gratitude for the lesson learned, resolve to move on, and a subtle acknowledgement of her indifference. It wasn't spiteful, but it wasn't forgiving either. It was simply honest. Before leaving, Ethan took one final walk through the house. His footsteps echoed softly, each room holding memories that felt more like ghosts. The living room where they used to spend evenings together now felt cold and lifeless. The kitchen where they had shared countless meals now seemed like a monument to their distance. As he reached the front door, Ethan took a deep breath, letting the gravity of the moment settle. Then, with a calm resolve, he stepped out, pulling the door shut behind him. The click of the lock felt like the final punctuation mark on a story that had long since ended. Ethan didn't look back. For the first time in years, he was moving forward toward a life where he could finally be free. Days passed without a word from Ethan, but Sophia hardly noticed. Her routine remained unchanged, scrolling endlessly through social media, texting Daniel, and sipping her morning coffee without a second thought. The quietness in the house didn't strike her as odd. If anything, it felt like a welcome reprieve. To her, Ethan was just being his usual self. Distant, brooding, probably sulking over something trivial. She didn't bother checking the joint account or asking where he was. When he wasn't around, she assumed he was either at work or somewhere else, stewing in silence. His absence didn't register as unusual because, in her mind, Ethan's presence had long since faded into the background of her life. One evening as she lounged on the couch, her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. They exchanged a string of playful texts, his attention fueling her ego. The thought of Ethan never crossed her mind. As far as she was concerned, he existed solely to keep her life comfortable and stable. That he might have left, let alone been capable of such an act, was a possibility she didn't even entertain. Occasionally, she glanced around the house, noticing small things. A pair of shoes missing from the hallway. His laptop gone from the kitchen counter. Yet these details didn't alarm her. He's probably reorganizing or something, she muttered under her breath, brushing the thought aside. As the week drew on, the silence persisted, but Sophia remained oblivious. Her indifference was so deeply ingrained that it shielded her from the reality of the situation. Ethan, the man she had dismissed so easily, had finally left, but she was too wrapped up in her own world to realize it. For Sophia, life continued as usual until the cracks in her stability became impossible to ignore. Sophia sat across from the bank teller, her manicured nails drumming impatiently on the counter. She had come to the bank to inquire about a declined payment for an online shopping spree. Certain it was just a technical error. However, as the teller checked her account details, his expression shifted to one of awkward sympathy. "Ma'am," he began hesitantly. "Your joint account shows a remaining balance of $7.52. Sophia blinked, her mind struggling to process the number. "What? That can't be right," she snapped, leaning forward. "Check again. There's no way it's that low." The teller nodded, typing quickly into his computer. "It appears there were several large withdrawals made earlier this week. Were you aware of these transactions?" Her heart began to race. "No, I wasn't. What kind of bank lets someone drain an account like that without notifying me?" She shouted, her voice rising with each word. Customers nearby turned to look, but Sophia didn't care. "Ma'am, the withdrawals were made by the primary account holder." The teller explained calmly, though his tone carried a hint of discomfort. "That person is authorized to access the funds." Realization hit Sophia like a freight train. "Ethan," she hissed under her breath. Being abruptly, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the bank, her mind spinning. For the first time, the cracks in her stability began to show. Sophia's bad day worsened when her phone buzzed with a flood of messages. At first, she assumed it was Daniel, but the tone of the notifications was anything but playful. She opened the first one, a text from her mother. "Ma'am, Sophia, what is this? How could you do this to Ethan?" Her stomach churned as she opened another, this one from a close friend. "A friend? I can't believe you'd betray Ethan like that. Don't ever ask me for anything again." Panic surged as she scrolled through dozens of similar messages. Clicking on one, she discovered a screenshot. A damning record of her private conversation with Daniel. Every word was laid bare for her family and friends to see. The mockery of Ethan, the callous admissions of using him in the flirtatious exchanges with Daniel. Sophia's phone slipped from her hand as the weight of her humiliation sank in. How had Ethan managed to collect all of this? And worse, why had he sent it to everyone she knew? She hurriedly dialed her mother, who answered on the first ring. "How could you do this?" Her mother's voice trembled with disappointment. "Ethan gave you everything, Sophia. He loved you, supported you, and this is how you repay him?" "Mom, it's not what it looks like," Sophia began, but her mother cut her off. "Don't you dare lie to me. Everyone has seen the messages. You've embarrassed yourself and you've disgraced this family." The line went dead, leaving Sophia frozen in place. Over the next few hours, the full scope of her public humiliation became apparent. Friends stopped responding to her texts. She's avoided her calls. Even Daniel seemed to have gone silent. The social network she had carefully built was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Sophia woke up the next morning to an eerily silent house. Flipping the light switch in her bedroom, she frowned when nothing happened. Confused, she wandered into the kitchen, only to find the electricity was out there as well. Shrugging it off as a power outage, she tried to connect the internet, but the Wi-Fi was down too. Annoyed, she grabbed her phone to call the utility company, but before she could, her phone buzzed with an email notification. Final notice: water service terminated due to non-payment. Panic gripped her as she realized this wasn't a coincidence. Ethan, it had to be Ethan. Rummaging through the stack of bills on the counter, she discovered a pattern. Final notices and overdue payments on everything from electricity to the mortgage. Each account had been under Ethan's name, and now that he was gone, they were effectively shut off. Her so-called stability had been a house of cards, and it was all collapsing around her. She didn't have much of a place to call her own. By the afternoon, Sophia's frustration turned to desperation. She couldn't work remotely without internet, couldn't shower without water, and couldn't charge her phone without electricity. Her carefully curated life of convenience had been stripped away, leaving her with nothing but the uncomfortable reality of her dependence on Ethan. As she sat in the dim light of the late afternoon, Sophia's anger began to fade, replaced by an overwhelming sense of regret. For the first time, she was forced to confront the consequences of her choices. The stability she had clung to so tightly had disappeared, and with it, the illusion of control. Sophia was alone, and the life she had taken for granted was gone, perhaps, for good. Sophia sat in her darkened living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The electricity was still out, and the oppressive silence of the house was becoming unbearable. In desperation, she dialed Daniel's number, her fingers trembling. He was her last lifeline, the one person who had promised her a better life. She clung to his words, to the moments of warmth they had shared. Surely he would help her through this. Daniel answered after several rings, his voice hesitant. "Sophia, what's going on? You've been blowing up my phone." Her brows lifted. "I love that. I need you," she said, her voice breaking. "Ethan's gone. He took everything. Money, utilities, everything. I can't handle this alone." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Sophia thought the call had disconnected. Then Daniel spoke, his tone colder than she'd ever heard. "Sophia, I don't think this is going to work." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean? You said you'd always be there for me. You said I was all you needed." "That was when things were different," he replied flatly. "I didn't sign up to be dragged down with you. You're in a mess, Sophia, and I'm not the guy to fix it." His words were a knife to her chest, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. "So that's it," she demanded, her voice rising. "You're just going to walk away after everything?" "Look," Daniel said, his tone now tinged with annoyance. "I have my own life to worry about. I can't afford to deal with your problems. I'm sorry, but you're on your own." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Sophia stared at the phone, her mind racing. She wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. But all she could do was collapse onto the couch. The one person she thought would stand by her had abandoned her just as quickly as Ethan had. Sophia was left alone in the darkness, her carefully built facade crumbling around her. The stability she had once taken for granted was gone, and now, so was Daniel. For the first time, she felt the crushing weight of loneliness and despair. There was no one left to turn to, only the empty house and the hollow echo of her choices. Sophia stood nervously in front of Ethan's new apartment, her palms clammy as she raised a hand to knock. She had hesitated for days, unsure of what she would even say, but the desperation that had been gnawing at her finally outweighed her pride. The silence from him had been deafening, and with Daniel gone and her life in shambles, Ethan was the only person she could think to turn to. The door opened and there he was. Ethan stood calmly, his posture relaxed, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling inside. He looked different. Later somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Sophia's rehearsed words faltered under his steady gaze. Ethan, she began, her voice trembling, I was wrong, I made so many mistakes. But we can fix this, let's start over. Ethan didn't respond immediately, he leaned against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of traffic in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but firm. Sophia, why are you really here? Tears welled up in her eyes as she clasped her hands together. Because I need you, I was stupid, selfish and blind, I know that now. I'm ready to change, please Ethan. He shook his head, his lips curling into a faint, almost pitying smile. No, Sophia, you're not here because you've suddenly realized my worth. You're here because your life fell apart and you're scrambling to piece it back together. That's not true, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. I love you. Ethan's smile faded, replaced by an expression of quiet resolve. You don't love me, Sophia. You never did. If you did, you wouldn't have treated me like an accessory, like a tool for your stability. You're not sorry for hurting me, you're just sorry you lost the life I provided. Please, she pleaded, her voice breaking, don't do this, don't throw everything away. But Ethan stood firm, unmoved. Everything was already gone long before I walked out, he said evenly. You made your choices and now you're living with them. Good luck finding that stability you value so much. With that, he closed the door, leaving Sophia standing alone on the doorstep. As she turned to leave, the weight of his rejection settled over her like a storm cloud. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of what she had lost, and that there was no going back. The Sophia sat alone in a cramped studio apartment, a far cry from the spacious home she once shared. With Ethan, the once pristine furniture was replaced by a second-hand couch and the only light in the room came from a flickering lamp she had found at the thrift store. Bills and overdue notices cluttered the table, unopened because she already knew what. The stability she had so proudly valued had vanished, leaving her to confront the consequences of her actions. She picked up a dusty photo frame from the windowsill. It was a picture from their 3rd anniversary. Ethan smiling warmly as he held her hand. Sophia traced his face with her finger, her eyes misting over. She had mocked his love, dismissed his efforts, and now, for the first time, she understood what she had lost. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she set the frame back down. The silence of the apartment pressed heavily on her, broken only by the creak of the floorboards. When she moved, she thought of calling someone, anyone, but her phone stayed silent. Her friends had drifted away, unwilling to associate with someone labeled a cheater. Even her family, ashamed of her betrayal, kept their distance. Without internet, she couldn't even scroll through social media to distract herself. Her world had shrunk to the size of this tiny apartment, and the weight of her choices was inescapable. The loneliness was suffocating, her regret overwhelming. Sophia had built her life on convenience and appearances, and now she had neither. Meanwhile, Ethan's life had transformed into something he hadn't dared to dream of before. He stood on a sunny beach, a camera slung over his shoulder as he captured a vibrant sunset. Photography, a passion he had set aside for years, now filled his days with purpose and creativity. Beside him stood Lily, a kind and empathetic woman he had met at a local gallery. Her laughter was genuine, her support unwavering, and she loved him for who he truly was. They shared a quiet understanding that required no words. A connection Ethan had never experienced with Sophia. As they reviewed the photos together, Ethan's face lit up with a smile that reached his eyes, a smile born of contentment and freedom. The burden of his past was gone, replaced by a life filled with promise. In the evenings, Ethan worked on a memoir about his journey, a cathartic project that allowed him to reflect on how far he had come. The pages were filled not with bitterness but with gratitude for the lessons he had learned, and the resilience he had found within himself. One day Sophia stumbled upon a photo of Ethan and Lily online. They were laughing together, standing against a backdrop of sunlit waves. Ethan's expression was one of pure joy, his eyes sparkling in a way Sophia realized she had never truly seen before. She set her phone down, her chest tightening with an ache she couldn't name. Ethan had moved on, rebuilt his life, and found happiness without her. Meanwhile, she was left with nothing but memories and regret. Sophia whispered into the silence of her apartment, "I was wrong." But the words were swallowed by the emptiness around her. She had learned too late that stability wasn't about money or convenience. It was about love, respect, and connection. And Ethan had found all of those, just not with her. Ethan, reflecting on his journey, shared a final thought in his memoir. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting the other person. It's about finding happiness they can't touch and letting them see what they lost. And as Ethan's life blossomed, Sophia's world remained a stark reminder of what happens when you take someone for granted. In the end, their stories diverged completely. One a tale of growth and renewal, the other a lesson in the cost of indifference. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, like and share in the comments. Remember, history is a witness to the past, a light of truth, a living memory, a teacher of life, a messenger of antiquity, and see you soon.